Welcome to the Career Brand Story podcast, where we talk about your career, your brand, and your story. I'm Jeremy Tudor, a career strategist, brand marketer, and storyteller that created the Career Brand Story method that has helped thousands of job seekers craft their career brand story for today's job market and land their dream job. Jeb, it's great to see you here, and I was just thinking the other day that we've completed 1 year with Career Brand Story podcast, and this is episode number 30.
That's really exciting. I'm really glad that we were able to stick to it and show up consistently for our listeners. And thank you to our listeners for listening, giving us a chance for the past year.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to the next 30 and everything that comes out of it. It's been a lot of fun. So, today there's a few things that I think that are worse than anything for job seekers out here, that when they go to apply for that dream job, they never hear anything back. If you've ever been in that place, I know I've been in that place. I've poured myself, all of myself into a resume. I uploaded to an applicant tracking system, all for me to tell me to retype it into the applicant tracking system, hit the submit button, right? And then it just gets sucked into a black hole. Or maybe you were one of the few that actually lands the job interview. You go through a few rounds and then you get ghosted. And that, my friend, is what we call a bad candidate experience. And there are things that you can do to better market yourself for your dream job. Of course you can. We could list out just the 5 simple things that you could do to better position yourself. Go to my TikTok, Jeremy Tudor. You can find the how-tos there, right? But today, what I really want to focus in on our conversation is, what are great companies doing to attract the right talent, and how you, the job seeker, can tell if they're really being authentic about their culture. And so I'm excited to have Susan LaMotte, who is the founder, the CEO, and the principal strategist at Exaqueo, join us today. And I've actually, Jeb, you introduced me to Exaqueo, and then I started following them along. And Susan, I just want to let you know, I'm a huge raving fan now of your company. It's everything from, I'm like, if I wasn't doing what I already love doing, I would be pitching how to be working for you. Love the fact that you are out there helping companies figure out how to better position themselves and create that employee value proposition that creates a better candidate experience. She leads the business. She does strategic consulting for global 500 clients. At Exaqueo, she has worked directly with senior leaders at organizations including T-Mobile, CVS Health, BCG, and Lyft. And her work includes creating the whole self model, where she's pioneering the concept of source of influence over source of hire and creating the industry's really next generation candidate experience model. So Susan, welcome. We're really glad to have you here today.
Thanks for having me. I love talking about these topics, and it's really good timing because the job market is so hot right now. Employers are dying to hire all of you. And I also, earlier in my career, I don't know if you know this, I was a career coach. I actually wrote a career coaching book about 12 years ago. So I love talking to job seekers. It's really where my passion lies.
So just to kind of start off, and for my audience to learn a little bit about you, of where you are today, what brought you to this point in your career?
So like most people, I think I've had a really interesting career journey. Nobody, grows up and says, I want to be a recruiter or I want to work in HR. For me, the common theme I always tell people is I sit at the intersection of where business meets behavior. So I've been always really passionate about work. I got my first W-2 when I was 14, and I've worked ever since. I worked all the way through high school, all the way through college, through grad school twice. I don't let a lot of grass grow under my feet. And so I actually started my HR career while I was in grad school. I ran out of money and needed to get a full-time job. And so I found a job as a recruiter, and that turned into a real passion for HR. I just loved helping people find a place where they could really thrive. We think about employment It's not just like buying a product, right? It puts food on our table and a roof over our head. And so I've always carried that with me. And so from being a recruiter, I did HR consulting. I worked in career services for Johns Hopkins University for a while, and then had my own business doing career coaching, and spent a long time consulting in career coaching before going back into the corporate world, and serving in several recruiting leadership functions for the Ritz-Carlton and Marriott International. And while I was at Marriott, they asked me to rebuild the company's employer brand. For those of you that haven't heard the term, employer brand is essentially the way a company brands and markets their employment experience. So like the way you would brand and market a product, but you're branding and marketing employment. And as I was going through that journey, what I realized is there weren't a lot of firms that I could rely on. There weren't a lot of experts who could do research, market research in the job market, help me build a strategy, and then help me do all the creative, creative strategy and creative asset design, web design, photo, video production, all of those things. And so I thought, there's real space in the market to build that firm. And so I did. And 10 years later, we've had the privilege with working with Fortune 500 companies all over the world. It's a lot of fun.
So I love the fact that you talk about, helping people really be able to get to that place where they, thrive in their careers. And that's really the mission statement and kind of motto for my own life, is that I just believe everyone can thrive in their life and do what they love. And and I was just making a short video today on Instagram about that, throughout my entire career, I always heard people say that, well, business isn't personal, it's just business. But it's like, that just can't be true, because I come home and if I had a bad day at work, I carry that at home, and the paycheck helps put dinner on the table. And, so there's no way I can actually truly separate that. In one aspect, I understand the sentiment of that statement, but I don't think that that's a true feeling. I think all of us lean into these points in our careers that are hard and tension, and that we have to work through. As you got to where you are today, what's been one of the hardest decisions that you had to make in regards to your career?
It's funny that you're sort of intertwining those two things together, because we always talk about the data that HR collects, right, on people. It's usually from the time you start work to the time you leave. If you've ever taken one of those like employee engagement surveys at work, it doesn't really ask you about how you are at home or what life is like or what you like to do outside work. And so the reason that I share that is because one of the things that we research when we talk to employees is the relationship piece. So who are the people in your life that influence the decisions that you make? And then what we call internal self, which what are the values that govern your decision making? So that's part of why we think about it that way, because I experienced a lot of that. When I was at Marriott, I was flying high in my career. I was doing really well. I had built this employer brand. I got the attention of the C-suite. One of my proudest moments was sitting around a boardroom table with the chief marketing officer, the EVP for global communications, and the chief HR officer. And they were all fighting over where my function should sit. They all wanted a piece of the employer brand pie because they realized how powerful it was and how important it was to the organization. So it wasn't an ego thing for me. It was, gosh, I showed them how important employer brand was. I was offered a VP promotion and I turned it down. And I remember my dad telling me I was crazy. He'd worked his whole life to become a corporate executive, and he thought I was nuts. But you know what? I was thinking about having children at the time and thinking about my future, and it was really hard to walk away from an amazing, stable company like Marriott. I still am a loyal Marriott customer today, but I realized that the organization itself, the way that it was structured, and what would be required of me as a VP, as an executive, that was not how I personally like to thrive. I don't like to talk about fit in an organization per se, because you're not looking to fit, that square peg in the square hole. You're looking for a place where you can get your best work done in the way you get it done. And for me, I realized that the longer I stayed at Marriott, I wouldn't have that opportunity. I like to move fast. I like to get things done quickly. I like to be creative, but I don't like to spend hours making a decision. So that's what really led me to entrepreneurship and this opportunity to start Exaqueo. But it was a really tough decision to walk away from Marriott.
I bet.
Yeah. So as we've come out of the pandemic, women in particularly, the data showing us that 5.4 million jobs during the pandemic have been lost for women, over 4.4 million for men. So more women have lost their jobs than men, right, during this pandemic. And then about only 55% of them have actually gotten back into the workforce as we come out of this. And you're a working mother, you're an entrepreneur. And that's a lot, because I'm thinking, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a dad. I'm so thankful for my wife, and the support. She's doing her own thing too, but it's a lot on families today. And especially, when we look at, looking at that data, we could say, wow, that's going to be a real setback, for women in leadership kind of in the future. How do you see best for organizations to kind of respond and adapt to that as we come out of this pandemic?
So what's really funny about all of this, and ironic funny really, is I actually predicted that this was going to happen. In May of 2020, 2 months after we got through, we'd been through the pandemic, I wrote an article for Working Mother magazine. And the title was that working mothers would be disproportionately screwed after the pandemic. And we were.
Right.
I say working mom because, look, there are families that I tell my children this all the time. I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. I have a husband who is a really wonderful and participatory co-parent who also works full-time and has a demanding job. And families come in all shapes and sizes. I tell my kids that all the time. But so many of the things that have to get done at home traditionally fall to the female figure sometimes in the household. And so a lot of the women that I talked to for that article, including one in particular who had a really promising career in finance, had an MBA, she just up and quit her job because it was easier for her to do that. It starts to get really personal when you dig into it as to why it was easier for this particular woman. But the way that I look at it is the majority of decision makers in corporate America are men. They just are. For whatever reason, that's how work has evolved over the past century. And part of the problem with that is a lot of those men that are in decision-making roles, when they had young kids, they've either never had kids, or when they had young kids, they didn't have to worry about taking care of them. And so I firmly believe it's just harder for them to empathize. And that's the best thing that organizations can do, is to truly understand the plight of the working mother and the working parent, to stop and see the data, not just say we'll offer family leave. A couple of weeks ago, the CEO of JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, came out with some pretty powerful commentary to say, you know what, you're just going to have to get back to work. And those of you that can't, and I'm paraphrasing here, but those of you that can't, you're just not cut out for the hustle. And I think that's part of the problem. It's making working women conform to the model we've already had, instead of looking at these abysmal numbers, being embarrassed and horrified by them, and also wondering why we can't hire people right now. There's your problem. Because organizations are not thinking about how do we evolve and shift in order to meet the needs of the working woman. And it's a good question all job seekers can ask, to truly understand, what's it going to be like as a working mom for me in this company or in this job.
If everything that Susan just said were a meme, it would be one of those memes that say, read it again.
Yeah, right.
So play that back. Listen to that again.
Oh, goodness. I wish it wasn't
100%.
true. I really do. I really do. I hate hearing it out loud sometimes, but it is true. And I hate to preach about it. But gosh, I really want someone to pay attention. I want a big Fortune 500 company to stand up and say, you know what, we're going to make a different commitment and not just be lip service. And unfortunately, that's what's happening. And about 6 months from now, when they're still struggling to hire, and when there's the big turnover tsunami that we're all predicting that's coming, and they're really short-staffed, they're going to wake up and say, oh my gosh, we can't make our money without working moms, without working women. And then maybe they'll wake up and do something about it.
We certainly hope.
So I was 26 years old when I really entered into the corporate world. Fortunate that through my corporate career, I always reported to, an executive woman in leadership. And at 26, you just don't know anything, right? And so I was shocked when I remember the EVP at the time said to me, she was like, Jeremy, she's like, women get paid less than men. And I was like, that just can't be true. Like, it wasn't even equating in my head that was a thing. And it is a thing. And it's just insane that it's a thing. Because I coach, especially women who come and go through our process, and I coach them all the time. Like, don't just take the job offer. You need to negotiate back, because there is always more money there. I mean, I think that for everybody, but I think women especially need to feel empowered, to make that move. And I think the other point that you talk about is empathy, that the good leaders, the leaders who are going to actually make a difference, going forward, is those who can actually practice that emotional intelligence of empathy, and truly understand where people's needs are. So tell us a little bit more about Exaqueo. Just a high overview of exactly what you all do there. You guys have been growing. I know that you've been hiring and have a few open positions. So anyone out there who's looking for a great company, I'm telling you, you should check them out, because I read through the job descriptions. I shared it out to my network. So tell me just a little bit more about what you do there, what you love doing.
Yeah, sure. So Exaqueo is an employer brand consulting firm. So we brand and market the employment experience for our clients. So what that means is that they want to make sure that they're promoting what it's like to work at their organization, and they're telling that story for both candidates, job candidates, or those people that they want to recruit, but also for employees, because it's branding and marketing the whole experience. Because you've got to make sure that you are recruiting the right talent, but you also have to make sure you're continually marketing to retain that talent too, right? It's like Coca-Cola doesn't just spend money to acquire customers, they also spend money to make sure that they keep those customers loyal. And so that's what we do. We're a full service consulting firm and agency. And so we've got 3 arms to our business. One is the research side. We do a lot of market research to help companies understand how job seekers think and feel, particularly the job seekers they're trying to reach. We have a strategy arm where we focus on how do you build that brand strategy? What's that brand architecture? And then we have an entire creative and dev team. And so that team does all of our creative execution. So everything from building career sites to creating job advertisements, out-of-home advertising, radio spots. We do social media assets. And then we do a lot of creative guidance on the people that are interacting with candidates. So, if a recruiter calls you and they have this amazing conversation, that person was likely scripted or supported behind the scenes to engage with you as best that they can. And that's all part of what we do.
So I know that you, again, have this whole model around the whole self and really holistically, think about the whole person and their career and their experience and what that means, and talk a lot about authenticity. It's something I value that we embrace here at the Career Brand Story team as well. Why do you think that's so important for employers to express today? Like, just the authenticity and really being real.
Yeah, it's because, candidates don't want to see lipstick on a pig. Nobody does. There is nothing worse than getting super excited about a job and then you start the job and it sucks, right? Or it wasn't what you were promised. I always use the analogy, you can open a can of ginger ale, and if there's Coke in there, it's not that you're disappointed, it's that you expected ginger ale. It's not that you don't like Coca-Cola. And so that's the challenge. That's why it's so important. So we feel really strongly that employers shouldn't just say, here's what's great about working at our company. What's traditionally in our industry called EVP, or employer value proposition. If you Google employer brand, you'll see a lot about EVP. That's kind of the older school way to do employer brand, which is, here's what's great about working at this company. Here are the 5 things, and let's tell lots of stories about these 5 things, and let's put it all over our career site. Really, what we're focused on is beyond EVP, helping our clients brand and market the commitment they're going to make to you as a candidate. So if I put myself in the job seeker's shoes, it's so important that the employer does that. And an employer that's more honest with me, I should respect more, because they're actually pulling back the curtain and saying, hey, look, here's what's great about what it's like to work here. Here are the things that people find value in working for our organization. Here are what we call the realities. Those are the things that are neither good nor bad. So we have a client who's a frozen food manufacturer. The plant is 32 degrees. I live in Charleston, South Carolina. I hate the cold weather, so I wouldn't thrive in a plant that was 32 degrees. That's neither good nor bad, right? I love vegetables, and so this frozen food plant that makes vegetables is important to my life, but it wouldn't be a career for me because of that reality. And then there's the detractors. That's where an organization is really honest about the things that they're not good at. So for example, you have a lot of companies right now that are trying to commit to diversity and inclusion initiatives. The ones that are most successful are the ones that are saying, look, we recognize perhaps that our numbers are not strong, but here's what we're doing about it. Here's the journey we're on. So they're actually saying, this is a challenge. We recognize it's a shortcoming. We're doing something about it. And we're going to be honest with you. So as a job seeker, that's what I tell candidates all the time. Don't just look for the great things. When you think about at the end of an interview, what are the questions you're asking the employer? Ask them what the realities are. Tell me what it's really like to work there. What are the things that, cause some people not to cut it? Another great question to ask is, if I were to start a job at your organization tomorrow and I said, what would make me super successful there? Give me true understanding behind the scenes. What advice is going to make me successful? How should I behave? How should I not behave? And then the last thing you can ask is, tell me what you don't like about working here. What are the things that scare people away? What are the biggest challenges? But in spite of those challenges, you stay at this organization. You're going to get such a better answer and more rich information than the recruiter who only wants to talk about the good stuff. If they only want to talk about the good stuff, that in and of itself should be a big red flag because they're afraid to tell you what it's really like. And that's where you're going to truly understand, can I actually thrive there? It's like a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a spouse or partner. I am a total neat freak. My husband is not, yet I married him in spite of that. He married me in spite of me being a neat freak and all of my obsessive trips to the Container Store. But it's as funny as that is, that's how we should think about jobs, right? So think about Amazon and its aggressive workplace. For some people, that fast pace, if you work in a warehouse, you're on your feet 12 hours a day as a picker, going back and forth. For some people, that's exhausting, but maybe they love it. Maybe that's how they get their exercise in every day. So those are the kinds of conversations that you should be having as a job seeker to really uncover the truth.
Yeah, that's really great advice, and advice I wish I had heard way back when I was in the corporate world. I wish that I had asked those questions. Now I just work for myself and I'm responsible for my own misery, but that's really great advice.
So I think one of the hot conversations right now that's happening is as companies come back to work, do I get to continue to work from home? And I just read, it was in Fast Company last night that popped up on my phone, and it said, why workers are calling BS on leaders about returning to the office. Workforce scholars find that employees are feeling burned out over broken work from home promises and corporate culture BS as employers try to bring them back to the office. And I can't remember what her name is, the president at, I think it's GM. But she came out with a policy and basically said, work appropriately, right? But people are really struggling with this. I think that, I've had clients who have said to me, look, I'm really fine. I'm ready to go back to work. I think it's for those of them that have been kind of on top of the family. They need that kind of break. They need that space. I've also had plenty of clients who they are actually thinking about, okay, I've been working remotely. I like this lifestyle. How do I keep doing this? And so there's just a lot of debate right now between, and you'll see the polls on LinkedIn. They just keep coming of working from home, working at the office, work flexibility. And that's just one aspect of things that we consider from a value standpoint of is this really the right place for me? How do job seekers and employers bridge that gap of the needs between one another?
It's such a good question because I think the past 12 to 18 months have opened that up more so than ever before. We always used to look at employment as this transactional relationship, this give and get. You give me these benefits and this money. In return,
Right.
you get my hard work. What we know now is that employment is not like that. It's more attuned to like what we call in the academic world of relationships, an exchange relationship. Sorry, a communal relationship, which is much more about collaborating and working towards a common goal. So when we think about these virtual work policies, and I call them virtual work, not remote, because that means you're disengaged or far away, and not work from home, because part of the beauty of this notion of working virtually is you can be anywhere. You can go visit your sick parents. Right. You can go take your RV anywhere you want to be. And so I like to think about it that way. But the most important thing is only roughly 22% of jobs can actually be done outside of a workplace. And so instead of thinking about it as a virtual work policy per se, I like to think about it as what's the work opportunity. So you're thinking about what your approach is. So the GM CEO that you mentioned, Mary Barra, that idea helps you frame it more effectively, because then you can say, okay, if I really do want flexibility in where I work, then I've got to choose a job that's going to allow me to do that. I can't work on a manufacturing line and work virtually in most cases, right? So that's step number one. I think step number two is organizations truly having the data to understand what people want. And that's what you can do as a job seeker, is be really transparent up front. There's an article in Bloomberg today, I believe, about working virtually. And it talks about a lot of people who are quitting their job when they find out that they have to go back to work and there's no flexibility on virtual work. And one person shared her experience. She got called back to the office for what she said was like a 6-minute meeting. And she just decided to quit right there. She said, that's a sign that they're not listening to me. So what she did as a job seeker, which I thought was super smart, is in the interviews that she started doing to get a new job, the recruiters asked what she wanted, and she was super transparent. She said, this is my guardrail. I want to be able to work 100% virtually. And they said, sure. And right now, it's a really hot market for job seekers. So you have that power, you have that ability. So the more transparent you can be about the needs that you have, where you can be flexible and where you can't be, is just going to behoove you. You don't want to go through a whole job search process only to find out that, the virtual work, what they're promising is like 1 day a month, and that's not going to work for you. So it's the transparency and the honesty that's really going to drive the relationship effectiveness, I think.
Well, and I think there's this misbelief for the job seeker that they actually have the power and the ability, I should say the empowerment, to actually ask those questions and be honest like that up front. I know a few years ago, I interviewed for a job, went through the whole process, met with a team of people. They were ready to offer the job, and it really did come down to like being able to work virtually. And I wasn't even asking for 5 days a week I'd ever want to come in. I was just asking for 1 or 2 days where I could be kind of positioned at home around my kids. We homeschool, they kind of need that attention and have that flexibility in it. And it was just a hard no. It was not going to happen. And I work talent acquisition recruiting. I've worked virtually for the last probably 7 years out of the 16 years that I did that. So it's no, I know that's possible. And so, I called the HR person, the hiring manager, and I said, I'm not interested. And she was not happy with me. There was that feeling of I can't believe you took us through this process. But it was well, I don't feel like I wasn't up front. And so I think that job seekers encounter that, and that's really frustrating. Yeah. And then I think the other piece of that is that, you're sitting at a table and you want that job. You're thinking, if I could just get the job offer, and you're flattered when you get the job offer, but yet it still may not be the right thing for you. And I just think that that's a hard thing for job seekers. It's a misbelief that they have the empowerment to walk away from the table if that's the best thing for them to thrive in their life.
So 12 years ago when I wrote my book, The Right Job Right Now, it was before social media. So a lot of it is outdated in that sense. But I have a model in the book called the Kaleidoscope Model. And the idea is that everybody comes to the table with a certain set of skills, abilities, and behaviors, right? You don't want to hear me sing. No matter how much I try, I cannot make a career of singing. But if you shift that kaleidoscope ever so slightly, you can change what you're looking for. If you make a big shift, you can change it completely. So the idea is if you look inward and figure out from yourself what's most important, what are your top criteria that you're absolutely not willing to budge on, and then don't make exceptions, right? Compare the job offers to that. It makes it a lot easier to turn down those things, right? It's like, let's say you want to have kids and you find a partner who doesn't. If you're really convicted in that belief and you've already made that commitment to yourself, then it's a little bit easier to walk away from that relationship. The same thing can be said for jobs. And yet we just wait and we're like, oh, I've got this job offer. Now I'm going to sit down and think about, is this right for me? I think doing that introspective work first is so important and crucial to making the right decision.
Yeah, and I think, Jeremy, talking about I guess hostility may be too strong of a word, but the kind of hostility you receive from the hiring manager, it just goes back to, like, that's another red flag. You wouldn't want to be there anyway, because, going back to what Susan said about a communal relationship versus a transactional one, exchange relationship, you want to sit on the same side of the table as people, not across. You're not supposed to be enemies in an interview situation. You're supposed to be saying, we're going to work together. So, I really think that just goes back to being transparent. If they're not going to be transparent, you can at least be transparent and know if this position aligns to your values and what you want out of your career.
Yeah, and that goes back to with our clients, we have a talent insight assessment we use. The science behind it is DISC, so it's behavioral. And I think that's an important piece of knowing how you like to do things. We're also able to measure why people do what they do, what drives them and motivates them, which is where I actually think most job seekers get stuck because, when we interview for a job, we typically interview on skill set. And 9 out of 10 times our behaviors will match up with that. I'm not really convinced that most hiring managers understand the behavioral questions they're really asking and why. And the likability bias sneaks into the interview, and that's why you end up with the job. Like, we really would like working with you. And then there's issues that come because you haven't tapped into your why and what really motivates and drives you. But, understanding both the behavioral component and that motivational component can create more job satisfaction. Back to the example I was giving, she even walked me by this glass cubicle that I would sit in as if look, this would be where you get to sit. Well, if you know me behaviorally, I love my autonomy. I don't want to be constrained to anything, to a schedule, to this is where you're going to sit for 8 hours a day or anything like that. And so, but knowing that about myself, right, it's why I do what I do today. I went and worked for the state of North Carolina, and I hated it, to be quite honest. I worked for the Department of Revenue. It was the most boring job in talent acquisition I ever had, and mainly because I just didn't feel like I had that ability to do things the way and how I did things, Now, I later had a great boss that she did see that, understood my autonomy, and allowed me to do the work that I wanted to do. But it takes understanding of yourself, and then it takes understanding of who's leading to allow you to kind of operate that. So my best boss was, the director of Special Olympics, the head of HR for Special Olympics, and she's the one who first took me through DISC and helped me understand that. Now looking back on it, I realize she managed me exactly like that, and again, hands down, I would say, man, she was an amazing leader because she took the time to understand me individually. And I think that misses the mark for a lot of people in their jobs today.
Yeah, it's so true. And I also think we sometimes don't stop and ask the question, who will my leader be? Yeah. And what is their style? Right. And we're so focused on the interview, right? It's so one-sided. I come in, you ask me a whole bunch of questions. I get 5 minutes at the end to ask my questions. That's not how a relationship should be. And if we stop and think about it, that's, the power is in the job seeker. You get that job offer, make sure, they should allow you to talk to your leader again. Can I talk to my manager one more time? I want to understand. I've got some questions for him or her. Do all of those things to make sure that you get the information you need, because you raised such an important point about the role that the manager plays. It's a big part of the relationship. You're not just joining an organization, you're actually spending, a lot of time with a couple of people. So it's really important to understand what that working relationship will be like.
Well, Susan, I have one last question for you. We ask every first-time guest on our show this question. What do you want to be when you grow up?
I love that question because I don't think it has a one answer. A couple of years ago, maybe longer than that, a woman named Marcy Alberher, she used to be the career columnist for the New York Times, wrote a book called Slash Careers. And the idea is that you can have multiple careers in your life. So I actually dream about doing some things that are really different. Like I spent this weekend doing a lot of painting and building. So I would love to be like a woodworker. I think that would be really amazing. I also dream about writing children's books. So I love this idea of slash careers where you can do a lot of different things in your lifetime instead of just ascribing to one.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, Susan, thank you so much for sharing your insight on how companies can think differently about attracting talent, how job seekers can ask the right questions and really think about where they want to go next. It's going to be a really interesting year as we have this understanding that, again, a tsunami of talent change is going to happen with 1 in 4 of employees saying, look, I'm not happy where I'm at. I'm going to make a move. I will tell you, the month of May was back to our pre-COVID amounts of work we were doing. And so I think it's coming. And already just in the first 2 days of June, I thought, well, for sure it will slow down. Like there's that, and people are calling. Yesterday I had like 4 different referrals that were floating in. And so I think it's a true thing that's being said. I think companies will be smart to listen to what's going on and make strategies and have a deep understanding of how they need to respond to their current talent workforce. Thank you for what you're doing out there. If you're looking for a job, go check out Exaqueo because they're hiring and it's a cool company and they got some cool things going on there.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I won't give any names, but I've had the pleasure of working with Susan on a couple of projects, and she is the real deal. Her company is the real deal, and the companies that they do work for have been the real deal for me. Just the nature of the work we were doing, it wasn't putting lipstick on a pig. It was real people who you could tell really appreciated what they did. So her company is obviously doing some great things out there, and I would encourage you to go check them out.
Hey, this episode is sponsored in part by Enter Your Fellowship. Are you a college graduate or in college and at least 21 years old? Are you seeking to understand how to best participate given your unique gifts, talents, and desires? Maybe consider taking an intentional gap year to gain clarity. Enter Your Fellowship is now accepting 2021 and 2022 applications. Let's close the gap together. You can apply today at enteryour.org/apply. You can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. Just search for Jeremy Tutor, and on Instagram, I'm at Jeremy T. Tutor. And also, while many of you listen to a podcast, because that is what a podcast is for, you can also watch each episode on YouTube. We have a landing page now. Just go to careerbrandstory.com. You can connect with us on any of our listening platforms there. Watch us on YouTube, and we would love to have you subscribe and like and be a part of all of our episodes that are going on there. Comment. Let us know what you think. Tell us what you want to talk about. This is why we're out here doing this podcast. We want to be able to talk about your career, your brand, and your story. And Susan, we want people to be able to connect with you. And so where can they be able to do that?
So you can find us at exaqueo.com, EXAQUEO, on Instagram or Twitter at Exaqueo. And you can find me on Instagram at Susan LaMotte or on LinkedIn /Susan LaMotte as well. Happy to take questions and continue the conversation.
All right. And Jeb, where can people find you?
As always, you can find me on my website, jebgraff.com. That's JEBBGRAFF. And @jebgraff is my handle everywhere else.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and keep thriving.
If you're interested in advertising your business on our podcast, we advertise for local and national companies. Contact McKay at careerbrandstory.com for more information. That's MCCAY at careerbrandstory.com.